founder and CEO of EVB. We have offices in San Francisco and in Boulder, Colorado. And the last time I presented here was about 3 years ago. And I ran out on stage, and I was talking fast, and I was running around, and I almost passed out because of the altitude. I wasn't ready for it, and I found myself out of breath, and I had to catch up. So I'm going to start slower this year and see if maybe I'll ramp it up. So I am going to be talking about millennials, and I love the way that Brian set that up, because I hate this fucking word. I hate it. And I hate it. I hate it because it's become, I mean, it started out as a definition of a generation, right? Which kind of makes sense. It's as there's, breaks in behavior, there's breaks in demographics or psychographics, it makes sense to be able to sort of label the next group coming in and have some sort of defining mechanism to be able to describe them and work with them. And if you look at, so I hate doing this too, but I did it anyway because it sets it up well. I did a, like how does Webster define millennials and how does Google define millennials? And it was a person born between the 1980s or 1990s was Webster. Google was a little tighter. It said a person reaching young adulthood around the year 2000. I think if you asked anyone in the industry, any of your bosses, your teachers, your parents, or your peers, to define millennials, this would not be how they would do it. It would probably be more, it probably contains some more colorful language like no work ethic, undependable, irresponsible, stubborn, lazy. Maybe it'd even have unaccountable, unmanageable, insubordinate, sloppy, absent. Maybe there would be lacking drive, disloyal, disinterested, spoiled, disillusioned, ignorant, underachieving, cocky, self-obsessed, and of course, what's the big one? Entitled. You got it. Well, slide didn't go. Yeah, and that drives me nuts because this is not how you define a generation, This is how you define a bad employee, This is how you define a loser, And I feel like it's almost like and I'm not saying that the two are equated at all, but it's almost as if like millennial is getting a label like hippie got a label, where it's like, okay, there were hippies in the 60s, but there were also hippies in the 70s, and there were also hippies in the 80s and the 90s, and it's sort of like a type of person, not necessarily the label for a generation. And I have a feeling that's kind of like those Webster and Google definitions I showed. I would imagine 10 or 15 years from now, they're going to be very different, because I don't see this word going away. I think this word is just going to define a type of person who is acts a certain way. And it's sad to me. It's unfortunate that that's become the label of a lot of your generation. I don't want to drive this home too much, but if you search, do Google image search for millennials, this was the #1 picture that came up. Is a disinterested, young employee, like looking super bored as her gray-haired boss is trying to talk to her. There's this one. I didn't dig deep for these. These were right on the first. So this is, the woman with the headphones and the bare feet with her legs up, acting like the boss and staring you down. And a lot of these were attached to articles about how do we manage millennials? Like this scary new group is coming in and they don't want to work hard and they value experience over things, and money's not as important to them, but this whole system is set up for people who value their job and value achievement and value moving forward. So how are we going to deal with that? There are also a ton of these, which are the sort of obligatory stock photos of a diverse group of people on their various devices, as if millennials are the only ones who use mobile devices. Oh yeah, there's more. So but it gets even worse though, and this is what drives me nuts. So this is Jack in the Box, right? Jack in the Box is a company that I imagine, Jack in the Box is a national brand, right? You guys all know Jack in the Box? Yeah, for the most part. So they're a fast food restaurant. They sell hamburgers and tacos and other stuff. And I'm assuming that, I mean, I've never worked on the brand, but I have worked on QSR in the past. And usually our target is, you know, like 16 to 24-year-old, you know, men who are boys who are going to, like, you know, drive through and order fast food. And so what do? They do an ad that they make fun of young people. They make fun of millennials. And I got to imagine ads like this are coming out of agencies that have, you know, 40, 50-year-old art directors and copywriters who are like, hey, we got to do an ad for millennials. I got an idea. Let's have a lot of selfies and let's talk about the fact that these people don't really work that hard. And I can't imagine that's what you guys connect with. Like, that's what you want to see in advertising. You know, Honda did the same thing. They did, you know, the selfie car of a self-obsessed woman who's probably in her early 20s who took so many selfies that they built cameras inside the car so she could always have selfies running as she drove. Again, it's like you're trying to sell, you know, cars to these people, yet you're treating them like they're silly. And so, what? Obviously, you know, I'm not up here to preach at all, and I apologize if anything that comes across sounds preachy. Truth is, like, I feel like I was a millennial long before there was a label for it, and I feel like I'm kind of a 47-year-old millennial now. A lot of people who I worked with, you know, back, I started at Saatchi & Saatchi in '95, and a lot of people I worked with back then said, you know, it's a good thing you started your own agency, because you never would have made it in this business. You never wanted to work hard enough, you know. It was, I just looked at the world a little bit differently. And again, this is how the world sees millennials. And if I were you, if I was a millennial, I'd be pissed. You know, this is not the way that you want your generation defined. I mean, they called my generation slackers, but it was never like this. I mean, it sort of like came and went, and it didn't stick the way this has, and it didn't become sort of, you know, woven into our identity. We outgrew it. But I feel like the millennial thing is not being outgrown. Like, it's moving up and it's moving down, and you know, people are calling my kids. I've got a 12-year-old and a 10-year-old, and like they're millennials now too. Like, which totally blows Google's definition out of the water, because they're not going to, you know, achieve adulthood until they're like in, like, you know, 2022 or something. The talk I gave 3 years ago when I was up here was very similar, but it was more about, you know, if you look at millennials, you look at 20-somethings, they're always the ones that are changing the world. They're always the ones that are doing things because they have an unrealistic optimism. They've got less risk in their life. You know, they have less. They can take more risk because they have less to lose. And you know, my talk 3 years ago was everybody should go out and quit your jobs at agencies and try to start a business, because this is like one of the few times in your life that you can do it. Like, once you buy a house, once you have kids, once you're married, once you get older, it becomes a lot harder to do. I was super lucky when I started EVB. Like, I lived off of my wife's salary. I was lucky to have that. And, you know, because we couldn't pay ourselves for the first year. So, you know, and one of the things I talked about then was, you know, if you look at, like, the people who have completely reinvented communication and the way we behave and the way we interact socially, they're all people in their 20s. I mean, this is just a smattering of, you know, like Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, Airbnb. You know, the fact that there's that label, that generation, and you look at guys like this is just so incongruous to me. But I think it's fear. Like I said earlier, the older generation sees you guys as the future, and they see how things are changing and how the way people work is changing, and it scares them because they don't know how to manage it. That's why there's so many articles out there about how to manage you guys, you know, which is crazy when you think about it. But this has happened over and over again. I mean, it's the reason, you know, taxis hate Uber and MP3s, or the music business hated MP3s, I mean, it's like when you see this massive change happening, people get scared and they get protective. This was 35 years ago, but do you think the industry wasn't freaked out by these freaky bearded guys in the 70s? I mean, that's Bill Gates and Paul Allen and Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak, who revolutionized the PC market. And it's like, again, they're like they're four guys right out of college. So it's a tough one because I feel like you guys get beat up in the press for this all the time. And so what I wanted to talk about today, there are some truths to these stereotypes, and I do find myself from time to time like, oh, fucking millennials. It's like, when somebody calls in sick for a silly reason or doesn't come through with something. So, there are some things that I feel like, we could try to do to sort of build bridges and help you guys kind of shed a little bit of the stereotype. And I'm going to run through them in sort of like a listicle type of way. The upside is, the expectations are really low. I mean, a lot of the HR departments, operations, the people hiring out there are like, oh yeah, millennials all act this way, so don't expect a lot from them. You don't have to do much to stand out. I think the first thing, and I wish I'd learned this when I was younger, is like understand the business that you work in, not just the business of account service or creative or project management, or if you work for an agency, understand how the agency makes money, and understand what the gross profit means, understand what the EBITDA means. When you're talking to your boss or your manager, have them know that you're interested and you understand his problems and his challenges, or her problems and challenges, and that you're there to contribute. And that'll go a long way. It sounds silly, but I feel like I didn't really understand the business of advertising until I had my own agency. And you realize that there is so much pressure, that margin is so tiny, and everything comes out of it. Raises, bonuses, investments, and there's so much pressure down on it. And that's what's going through your boss's head. And if you can get in there, it really helps out. Show up and be present. This one, it doesn't need a lot of backup. A lot of the companies you work for now have policies that allow you to work from home or are more flexible, but really understand the nature of the work you're doing. If you've got to write a proposal, or if you've got to write a brief, or do a lot of research, yeah, do that from home. But if you have to collaborate with people and you have to deliver something that's going to take a lot of like sitting at home with your phone on isn't working from home. That's reactive. But be proactive and be part of a solution, and then be present. It's and this is a silly one, and everybody does it. I do it all the time. In meetings, and I notice nobody's doing it here, which is awesome. In meetings or in presentation stuff, laptop down, cell phone away. There's plenty of time to deal with that. There's no such thing as multitasking. I can't tell you how many times I hear like a question asked at the end of a meeting that was answered like 4 times because somebody was multitasking. Learn behavior from mentors, not peers. I mean, one of the things I've noticed with younger people is there's definitely, and I think this has been proven, there's definitely a sort of this idea of affiliation is really important. So you get lots of sort of groups and herds inside of companies. Be careful about picking up those behaviors. Like look to people who you aspire to be more like, or people who have made it, and look to gain behaviors from those types of people. I think that'll be helpful as well. Ask a lot of questions. That's one of the criticisms I hear a lot from new employees coming in and being full of opinions, but not really asking a lot of questions. So that's something that I think is also super important. Master communication. There are like 80 different ways that you can get a message to me. And 75 of them are probably electronic. One is putting a Post-it on my chair or leaving me a message. But every single one of those ways, based on the nature of the message or the nature of the audience or the time, there's a different way to do it. And communication is, it's talking, it's listening, it's following up. It's making sure that, communication is just the means to the end. You want to get something over here, and it can't just be like, well, I sent a text. I mean, if they didn't do anything, then that's not my issue. Take the blame. Don't be afraid to take accountability. Even if it's something that you feel like there is shared blame, don't be afraid to stand up and just be like, you know what, I'm going to do that differently next time. Your managers will really, really appreciate it. Be the master of your own fate. Your happiness, your success, your advancement inside of a certain job or a career is not the responsibility of the company you work for or the responsibility of your boss. It's your responsibility. And the thing about most agencies is you can run at your own pace. You can do as much as they're going to throw at you. So they don't feel like you have any barriers or blocks around you. And the last one is quit with class. There's a really good chance that great job that you're moving up into, the reason you got it is because of all the experience and work and everything that you did at your current job. So be very respectful when you leave a job. And bosses don't really care that you quit a job, but they get really upset when they feel disrespected and they feel like you don't quit the job with class. So the 3 takeaways I have are, a lot of this came out through the presentation, but understand your boss and his or her business. I think that's really helpful. Focus on results over effort. It doesn't matter if you're working really hard if it's not resulting in something. Actually, usually if you're working really hard and it's not resulting in something, you get the opposite of a promotion. And then lastly, aim to surprise and delight. Like I said, it doesn't take much. I mean, you can really get noticed in this environment right now by doing very little and making some really good connections with your managers and bosses.
Thank you, Dan. That's fantastic. Yeah, you can take that over there.
Do what?
Are there any questions? We're actually a little bit over, but if anyone has a question for Dan, the floor is open. Over here.
Just curious if you've given this talk or talking to your peers on this subject about how we're not as evil as we're made out to be.
Wait, say that again?
I'm just wondering if you've given this conversation, if you had this conversation with your peers, people that hate us, and how they've taken to it. Not in this sort of forum.
I'm not doing a roadshow on like be nice to millennials, but inside the agency, we definitely do. I mean, we're a 15-year-old agency that's always focused on young talent and brands that are focused on young consumers. So for us to be anti-millennial would be suicide. I mean, I think the average age of our agency, including like the 40-year-old managers, is like 28. So we're trying so hard to figure out how to embrace a new work style and a new lifestyle. So my peers, I have this conversation with all the time, but not on a larger scale like this.
Yeah. Unfortunately, we're actually a little over for this session, but that was great. I really appreciate it.
Oh, you're very welcome.